Thank you for joining me yet again on the Sutherland Report. It's a real privilege to have your company, and I will be continuing my political series where I have the unbelievably brilliant pleasure to meet some interesting people in my own country that will be standing as candidates for Reform UK. They are prospective parliamentary candidates right now. That registration will be happening in days, because as you know, there's a rumor going round. There is a rumor going round that we now have an election. I'm privileged to bring on Edward Oakenful, who will explain, and I hope I've got his surname right, I will ask him in a second, who will explain the constituency where he is standing, and we will go through our usual maps. Edward, sir, thank you so much for joining me. I hope I did not make a dog's dinner of your surname. It's a terrible moment when you've looked at the surname and you're about to go live, record, and then you have a mind freeze. But Edward, thank you so much for joining me. Let's talk about, you are standing in a very, very, very beautiful part of our country. I'm going to start with our map, that it helps the internationals to figure, and it's become a little bit of a staple diet. Now, would you say you're left of Leeds, slightly higher up?
No, just to the left of Sheffield, the red dot there.
That's
it. Pretty much
Brilliant.
Bang on Derbyshire Dales.
I do apologise, and I'm not insulting anyone in the Derbyshire Dales. I'm glad that you know that in regard to history. So let's show where the constituency is. Bang there, and then this is your constituency in the Derbyshire Dales. Edward, before I get on to talk about the constituency, why you're standing, you have quite an amazing career and something that we love in this country, which is sports. So could you remind us of your sporting prowess and your sporting history?
Played tennis to quite a high level. A few years ago, I played a lot of senior events and got to 47 in the world when I was over 45, which about 10 years ago. Played all over Europe. I've been to pretty much every country in Europe. I was trying to actually visit every single country, but there's only a couple that I've not been to. With the internet, Mark, it's just fantastic. I've got friends now all over Europe that you can arrange to play doubles, mixed doubles with at these tournaments. Great to travel and see different cultures, different ways of doing things, Eastern Europe is very different from Western Europe, Southern, Northern. Yeah, fantastic, really. A few weeks ago, I was in Singapore. Great to see a big city like that that's incredibly well run. I go to London and I see completely different setup there, not how to run a big city. But getting back to the sports side of it, I've played a lot of tennis, which is an individual sport. In a football team, you can have a great game and lose 1-0, a lucky goal. But tennis, it's just down to you that's there. The microscope is on you. It's so gladiatorial. You're up against your opponent in a singles match, that is. And you learn a lot about yourself. And I've learned so much about myself from playing tennis. It's given me lots of friendships, lifelong friendships. Got to know lots of incredible people through it, and probably the most privileged thing that I did was I captained England in a Seniors Four Nations event against Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. To play for your country is just the ultimate, really.
Thank you, Edward, because I think that explains a lot about you and your roots and your passion. Because it leads into an easy question then. Why are you standing? Why have you now entered politics? Because you do not have a political background at all, except most probably like me, when we're sitting back going, I think we could do better. I am fed up with this and fed up with where things are going. So, Edward, why are you standing for Reform UK in that wonderful part of the world, in the Derbyshire Dales?
And it is a beautiful part. So I'd just put a plug for any tourism as well. Anybody looking for a staycation, come to Derbyshire Dales. There's some of the most beautiful scenery, fantastic hotels, and so much to see and do there. But in answer to your question, I've been so fed up with how our country's been run, not just the last few years, but for decades. This talk of managed decline. We've got an incredible country with an incredible history. I'm so passionate about our country. I despair what has happened. And I decided to stick my head above the parapet and try and get elected and to change things for the good of people.
So when you're going about your business, walking around the constituency, what are the concerns that people are bringing to you? What is number 1, 2, etc. on their agenda?
It's the economy, stupid. I think it's always the economy, stupid. I'm not referring to you, of course, Mark. It's obviously a saying, but people are just getting by. People are working really, really hard, long hours, bringing home the money after they've paid the tax on it, and they're hardly getting by. There's people that haven't had holidays, that can't afford fancy food, that are just living on the breadline. And they look around, they see mass immigration, you see the illegal immigration that is just people in hotels that are having everything paid for them. They're thinking, why on earth are we slogging our guts out, paying all this tax to this useless government that just wastes our money left, right, and centre? That will be the biggest one. We're a farming constituency as well. The farmers, they see what's happened in Holland with some of the crazy net zero policies that the European Union have imposed on farmers, which is just putting them out of business. Of course, there's been a rival political party set up in Holland, and it did really well in the last elections. I look at my counterparts in Wales. They've got a Labour-run government there, and farmers there are just despondent. How much of their land that they've got to put over towards hay meadows, planting trees, all this is taken away. Food production. Our country produces less than 50% of our own food. If there's some shock to the system, a war, for instance, there wouldn't be enough food in our country to eat. So the farmers are just being put out of business by all the regulations, and they're completely despondent. I mentioned the tourism industry as well. Another big industry. People are worried about that. There's been a new tax imposed by this so-called Conservative government on refurbishing holiday homes. Everywhere you look, there's tax on tax. People are fed up with it.
When you say about that is interesting. I mean, again, straight away, we're only producing 50% of the food that we are eating, which raises our food security is in peril there.
With the war in Ukraine, you would have thought with energy prices shooting through the roof and the chaos that caused to our economy, you would have thought politicians would have looked at strategic plans for our food production after that shock to this. That you would have been a wake-up call, but of course it isn't. Politicians are just dumbing down on this and creating more hurdles for farmers to produce food.
Could you explain the tax on, when you say about people that have got holiday homes, could you explain that? Because again, now we're starting to drill down to the issues that people are concerned about in your constituency, because saying the obvious, each constituency around the country, whether that's more of in a rural situation, whether that's mixed with rural and urban, all the concerns, there is a line of familiarity of the same issues, but there's also drilling down to the individual issues. So how does this tax work out in regard to holiday homes?
If you spend money refurbishing a holiday home, you can't deduct that from your tax. It's not tax deductible anymore.
Right. And you said it. What government has brought this in?
They call themselves a Conservative government, Mark, but they're really Conservative in name only. I can't think of the last Conservative policy that's been implemented by this government. You've got to go back a long way to look at any Conservative policies that they produced.
when we're talking about farmers, who are an incredible group of people that work so hard, you're saying it's 24/7, basically. Are the farmers in your area, are they then having what Rob, I quote him so much, Rob Reaney in Wonderful Bolsover turns around and says, the candidate there, double glazing all over fields, which of course is solar panels. Is that happening in your area as well?
Very much. You drive around lots of solar farms that are subsidised by incentives, which are on yours and my gas and electricity bills. Everybody's gas and electricity bill has a net zero tax on it, which is then regurgitated through a wasteful government and then given to often rich, very wealthy landowners that have got these solar farms and wind farms. All in favour of producing more electricity and solar and wind, but you would have thought now, after the decades that these have been around, that they would have been able to stand on their own 2 feet. They can't. They have to be subsidised by governments.
So immigration is having an effect on the area. You talked about the holiday homes, change in tax. What about, are people able to get a doctor's appointment? I know it's the classic question that's going on, but there is a theme here. So are people able to get a doctor's appointment? What about hospital infrastructure? What about the other infrastructures? Are there enough houses being built, etc.? Yeah. Edward, your thoughts?
It's a great question. My partner was trying to make an appointment for a mother the other day, and of course you've got to ring at 8:30 in the morning. She had it on the constant redial. I think she did it about 100 times, this redial, and still couldn't get through to get a doctor's appointment for a mother. And it's like that up and down our country. So Derbyshire Dales is exactly the same with that. That would be the second biggest concern, I would say, the NHS. The third being, you touched on it, immigration. So yeah, right. Doctor's appointments, it's a massive one, really.
What about access for young people in regard to buying their own house? Is there enough houses within your area? And of course, as you quite rightly said, then there's going to be a strain on that in regard to the amount of houses available because of the immigration issue.
Well, a lot of my constituency is the Peak District, which is, there's very strict building regulations and things like that in place. A lot of this is downstream from immigration, because we've had 10 million people, Mark, over the since 1997, 10 million people the population has increased by, and there just isn't enough houses being built for them. But So yeah, it is a common theme all across Derbyshire Dales. There's just not enough accommodation. There's only so many brownfield sites that can actually be built on, and I think people are very worried. There was talk of these new towns being built in countryside. I think where else are these? If we keep on going like this with this mass increase in the population, more and more of our countryside will have to be built on, and more of these rural constituencies will have to have new towns built on them. So all that's coming as well, and that's probably a big concern for people. They don't want it to change and have a big town plonked in the middle of a lovely green area.
And of course, the Derbyshire Dales, as you've said, in the Peak District, is profoundly famous for that. Hence why tourism industry is all the rest. So there's a strain on being able to make a doctor's appointment, that housing, there's taxes that actually you just think this is unfair when people are trying to improve their businesses. What about other infrastructure in regard to the internet, being able to plug businesses into that? What about business rates for people running in their own business industry within the countryside there? What are your thoughts?
I think after during COVID, a lot of people moved away from the cities and bought properties in rural locations and were able to run online businesses from there. So COVID probably speeded up a trend that was already happening. There are a lot of people that work from home in the Derbyshire Dales that rely on the internet reasonably good signals in most places. Some, of course, not. Yeah.
So, Edward, what are your dreams for your constituency? What are the problems that you want to solve? Because there is no doubt about it, you have energy to do that. You're extremely passionate about that. And one of the privileges of meeting you online was having that discussion before we came on to the interview. But I suppose asking this, what are young people in your constituency needing? Is there adequate schooling? Do you feel that aspiration is something that is taught to them? What are your thoughts about that?
Young people are struggling within the area because planning is very difficult for local people, so they can't extend their homes if they have a bigger family. A lot of young people are having to move away to the cities for cheaper accommodation. You mentioned the education side of it as well. I think we're letting down a whole generation of children. We had a previous conversation about British history and how it's not being taught properly in schools, and therefore a lot of children have got no pride in our country anymore as they grow up through the system. But there is so much to be proud about. Incredible history that should be taught properly to children. I think there's a lot of nonsense put in these children's heads, and we're seeing that in these marches in London, these marches, these pro-Gaza marches.
And yes, and people, they just go with emotions and not go with facts.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what's happened with
and not take the time to do that. So your constituency, do you know what the population of it is? Because I can imagine that maybe it's quite a challenge to get round the Derbyshire Dales, to get round the Peak District. I can imagine that.
Yeah, the constituency is 73,000 people, give or take. And it's a massive rural constituency because of the boundary changes as well. Different areas have been incorporated into it. And I'm sure a lot of people don't realise that they're part of Derbyshire Dales now. We have one of the longest life expectancies in our constituency in the country. So I mean, anybody that doesn't know that they're in the constituency, I think they should be on. The statistics are on the side with longevity.
Right. What are the transport links for you? What about bus services, trains? Are people having issues with those to actually get around the constituency? Because it's interesting when I'm talking to candidates, that is another issue that is coming up. What's happening in your part of the world?
I would say it's not a massive issue. There is a good bus network through the area. There's lots of buses to the Peak District and so forth. So it's not a massive issue. Probably the biggest issue is the popularity of the area. I was in Bakewell, which is a beautiful market town, but a bit of sunshine comes out. Bank holiday Monday, absolute gridlock through the town, and but because I'm local and I've lived in this area pretty much all my life, I know a lot of the little routes around that, so it didn't bother me too much, and I'm sure lots of the locals would also know that. For instance, but also our existing MP, she's from Essex, so she's very rarely in the constituency. I wouldn't have thought she's got much idea of how to get around the county.
So the MP?
A little dig at the MP there, but I'm sorry.
Well, I think this will be quite an interesting segue now. The MP, I do apologise, I don't know. What party are they from?
It's Conservative. It's a very true blue Conservative, and it has been for decades, really.
Right. So she has she lived in the area for a long time?
She has a house there, but I don't think she's there very often. She's based in Essex, and she, in fairness, she's down at the Houses of Parliament, so she's going to be down there a lot. But no, she's got a poor reputation, and she just shows up for photo opportunities and then goes away and often doesn't do a lot, really. I think that's the kind of reputation she's got.
So this is the difference, isn't it, Edward?
I was amused. She was in Bakewell Town Centre a few months ago. They had the NatWest Bank closing down, And over a year ago, there was a petition for local people to sign to say that they didn't want it closing down. But then after NatWest announced they were going to close this bank, that's when she showed up. She was on GB News telling everybody how much work she was doing to try and not get the bank closed down. But this is all, the news had already been announced that it was closing down. The taxpayer still owns, I think, about 48% of NatWest. She could have easily had a word with Rishi and said, "Look, this is sensitive to my constituency. Rishi, can you put pressure on NatWest with 48% shareholders? Don't close that bank." But they didn't, of course. It was all a charade, I think.
So she turns up for a photo opportunity. Is someone, how many has she just been? She was elected in 2019. Has she been previously the MP there? How long has she been the MP?
I think just the 2019. She was parachuted in at the last minute, really, when Patrick McLaughlin, the previous Tory MP, stood down.
And was he a local?
He was, actually, in fairness, yeah. From a working class background, I think he was a former miner as well, which similar to Lee Anderson, they've had proper day jobs. I despair for these MPs that come straight from university and they've perhaps been a parliamentary secretary or whatever, and then get a job as an MP because that's the career path. I've had proper jobs. I've worked in industry and business and understand things a little bit. But some young kid that studies at university that's got no experience of life, why on earth are people voting for these? It's just a party machine that puts them in place and they get elected. And what do they really stand for? How are they really going to change things for their constituents for the better?
So what is your concern about voter apathy in your constituency? Is there a lot of voter apathy around?
I think that, of course, there is. There's a lot of people. People are so fed up. I get it that people are despondent. They've probably there's a lot of people that have voted for Conservatives all their lives or the Labour all their lives, and they really are turned off with the weak leaders, for instance, Rishi and Sir Keir, and then Ed Davey, the head of Lib Dems, that was in charge of the post office. He was a post office minister when that fiasco happened. I think people voted for this Conservative government. The manifesto that they voted this government in, hardly any of it's been carried out. You probably got to go back to Tony Blair's government for the last time a government was elected that they actually carried out the manifestos in. I don't agree with Tony Blair's policies, but that was probably the last time that a manifesto was actually carried out. Reform of calling it a contract with the people, and we've got clear notes in there that these will be done within the first 100 days. So we're not deceiving anybody. This is a proper business contract that we're going to give to the people if we, to get elected.
I'm glad this. And I know I can understand the challenge of it. I'm glad the sun has come out. I'm glad that people have come out and start spending money in, your beautiful part of the world is really important, and it lifts people. So what are you able to do in regard to challenging the voter apathy? Are you going around the local pubs? Is there hustings going on? What meetings are you having?
Yeah, I've got 2 hustings. There's a National Farmers Union hustings in a couple of weeks' time. There's also the churches are still very popular in a certain area in Ashbourne, and I've got a hustings there for the Ashbourne churches. So I'll be meeting lots of people at those. But really, it's just getting out there, talking to people. A lot of the time, people are so despondent. Labour, Conservative, Lib Dems, they think they're all the same. They are pretty much all the same. It's just a change of management. They all believe in high taxes. They all believe in big bureaucratic, overbearing government with big quangos and waste and endemic waste. They all believe in the open borders. They all believe in the net zero. Reform offer a choice to the people. And if you can get to talk to them and just explain this, that we offer a genuine alternative to these three parties that are pretty much all the same. Yeah, it's just getting out and about. I've had a year, so I've got teams up and down Derbyshire Dales that are out as we speak, delivering leaflets in all the towns, and even we've not forgotten the villages, little hamlets. We're trying to get everywhere we can to get the leaflets out. I've got several interviews like this online with various YouTube stars like yourself, Mark. So yeah, I've done some videos as well that'll be on a YouTube channel of my own. So yeah, we're doing everything we can. I'm very active on social media as well, Facebook and Twitter particularly. Although Twitter, I'm quite skeptical. There's lots of activists on there. I'm not sure how many actual people in Derbyshire Dales. It can be a bit of a sewer at times.
What about I know you made it to the national press just over a week ago, but are there going to be opportunities? Can you make opportunities to get on local radio, whether that's something like the BBC or other local radios? Are those opportunities opening up?
I've approached lots of local radios, but nothing's come back at this stage. Radio Derby is a BBC publication, so it's difficult to get on there. I think the BBC try not to give Reform any publicity or exposure. So, but I think, yeah, there's a local newspaper, the Matlock Mercury, that I've got an interview with coming up.
Good. So does it also mean that please excuse my ignorance, you know the geography better than far me. If there is what we would traditionally called market towns, which enables you to go and visit, set up a little stall, so to speak, and then engage people like that, because it seemed wonderfully that you have been doing that. I think at this point, it'd be really good for you to give out ways that people can meet you, where they can reach you on social media, give out your email, Reform email, etc.
Well, my email is derbyshiredales@reformuk.com, so anybody can do that. They'll find me on Reform UK, on Reform UK Derbyshire Dales on Facebook. And you mentioned about going out and meeting people. Yeah, I've been to the farmers market and met many of the farmers. I've not gone along to preach to them. I've just gone along to listen to them and to hear what they've got to say. And yeah, the reform contract with the people was a working document. It's now been solidified, and that will be the manifesto that we're going to go with. But I did feed back information on that, and that farmers had told me some of their thoughts on the reform farming policy.
How did they appreciate your approach? Did they appreciate the fact that you said, "I'm here to listen. I genuinely am"? Was that appreciated?
I think it really was. Yeah, they'd never really had a politician go and spend time and go and amongst the sheep and the cattle and things like that, go and talk to these people. And a lot of these people are on their own. There's a lot of loneliness in the farming business. You're on your own on your farm, and it's just nice to talk to these people. I'm also involved in a farming charity as well, and farming has actually got one of the highest suicide rates as well, which all these regulations that have been thrown at farmers, and a lot of alcoholism within the farming community. I'm also involved in a food bank as well. Farmers are not hard up for food, but again, you realize about rural poverty and you'd think Derbyshire Dales, yeah, it's a chocolate box, scenery and everything else. There's no problems in this beautiful area, but you scratch the surface, and there is a lot of problems with, like I say, the people. There are a lot of people with alcoholism that spend all the money on booze, and then they've got no money for food, things like that. So I was impressed with the food bank that they actually taught them cooking skills and things like that, which we've lost in schools. That a lot of schools don't teach how to cook meals from scratch anymore, which is the cheapest form rather than living on takeaways.
Absolutely. Being a bit of a disclosure, being an ex-design technology teacher is something that I'd raise, where you would have all the home economists, equipment, but a lot of schools got rid of that because it's expensive in their eyes, but it's expensive to society for people not to be equipped with those skills. So
I see people living on takeaways and all the salt and sugar that's in these things. No wonder we've got an obesity crisis. Healthy food from scratch is a lot cheaper and healthier.
Well, something that I know that's important to you, because you've talked about it in regard to tennis. You've used fantastic words like gladiatorial, because it's down to you. You're the only person on that court. It's you v them. What are sports facilities, etc., like within the Derbyshire Dales, those kind of things?
I'm pleased to say there are a lot of tennis courts, a lot of public tennis courts, and they're very affordable as well. So some of the local authorities do a good job of that. I was involved in Ashbourne Rugby Club the other day. Beautiful setup there, cricket pitches. I would say the sporting facilities are very good. I think with swimming, people need to learn to swim. There are lots of rivers and things like that. And God forbid, we don't want anybody drowning. So I think that's a very important lesson that children need to learn to be able to swim. But there are bigger market towns with bigger swimming facilities and things like that. And again, with so many beautiful walks and cycle routes and facilities like that. So there's there's a lot of sporting facilities, really, I would say.
Well, you raise a very important thing. I know it's quite close to my heart, as I enjoy swimming, but I've said this a number of times in interviews, that a dear friend of mine has reminded me, and I've got to check this out. I know you'll pull me up because I've said this already once, that we may, sadly, 4 or 5 people a week drown in this country. And it is a very, very important life skill. But again, it's something where improving people's fitness, less strain on the NHS. I'm going to suggest a bit of PR to you. Maybe it'd be good if you challenge your opponents to a game of tennis or something like that. I think that would be really good. And
I did actually have a game of tennis with the Labour MP for Chesterfield, which is not far from Derbyshire Dales, and nice guy. Personally, I got on really well with him, actually. And I hammered him at tennis as well, of course. But
I don't want to hear anything else except you've hammered him. Well, brilliant. No, well done. So just
an interesting aside, John Bercow, the former Speaker of the House of Commons, was a very good tennis player when he was younger.
Right. But unfortunately, his politics are another question, because he is a classic illustration of, are these people really conservative? No, they're not. So
I almost think half the Conservative Party should be in the Lib Dems, or they should be part of the Labour Party. Anna Soubry, maybe even the Monster Raving Loony Party. I mean, how on earth did she ever get to become a Conservative MP?
I think that's the wonderful quote of this amazing interview with you, Edward, which is Anna Soubry should be in the Monster Raving Loony Party. Maybe that's something that needs to be campaigned for, but actually it's not needed. But
would they want to, Mark?
Well, that you said it. I think that raises a very, very good question. But actually, so we've talked about the concerns in regard to surgery, the concerns that people who own holiday homes, the taxes, the strains, people being at maybe.
There's also, if I may add, a lot of these farmers, they're struggling to make ends meet. So a lot of them take second jobs in the quarries in the north of the county. And again, the quarries are facing lots of environmental regulations. And, it won't take many more regulations for these quarries to be not viable, and they'll close. So thereby, these farmers that are just hanging on as it is, with these second jobs, lorry driving or working in these quarries, they won't have that second source of income, and then no income. Then they've got no income at all. These farms are going to have to be sold.
What kind of regulations is going on? Because this is a very important point because it's an important industry in that area. What are the regulations that they have to deal with?
There's a lot of health and safety regulations to do with the quarries. So there's a lot of environmental legislation. A lot of the limestone that they extract has to have offsets, biodiversity offsets, and things like this. Which I am part of a charity that we plant trees to offset carbon emissions. I live on a farm at the moment, and I've planted 4,000 trees on my farm here. But up and down Britain, we've planted a lot of trees to offset a lot of these carbon emissions that businesses are producing. And
Brilliant.
quarries have to
You are certainly going into controversial areas because what do trees do with CO2? This is not discussed, is it? Because they produce oxygen, which you and I need, and the more CO2, the trees flourish. That doesn't go down very well with green policy.
Yeah.
So, is there a theme here then, Edward, that actually, if this regulation, that regulation, food security going out the window, you can't do this, you can't do that. Is there a theme here that says, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it's as though they just want to destroy the whole of society? Or am I making that up?
A lot of my business history is as a buy-to-let landlord. I built up a large portfolio of properties. And this so-called Conservative government under George Osborne introduced lots of retrospective taxes that you built up this business. It's a long-term business, and then they bring in some retrospective tax that is going to clobber you with your interest on not being able to offset the whole of the interest against the profits. And then there's all sorts of regulations that they brought in to do with tenants, and it's almost they don't want people to get on in life. There's everywhere you look, there's an extra tax coming at you to hit you for whatever business. And this isn't just my own business. This is farming businesses. This is the quarry businesses. It's everywhere you seem to look at the moment. And this is under this Conservative government. Goodness knows what's going to happen with Labour there'll be yet more taxes on top of these taxes. They almost just want to they think they can spend your money better than you can. I think I can spend my money better than I can, and very much in favour of a much lower tax base to encourage people to incentivise them to take that promotion at work, to get off their backsides and get a job and work for them, rather than languish on welfare.
What about sort of finally in the last few minutes? What about colleges in the area, say from the 16 to 18 group? I know that, voting, registered vote, that's another issue. But what about engaging with young people on those? Do you think, and inspiring them to then engage in the political process, aspiration, all the rest? Because I can imagine that you would be a great speaker in those environments.
What a great point. Would you believe, we didn't know this beforehand, it wasn't prepared. I've actually been out with two 16, 17-year-olds today that were doing politics as an A-level subject. And no, there were 17-year-olds, 16, 17-year-olds. And as we toured the area, talking politics, and I did actually mention that question to them, and they said a lot of their friends at the university that they were at were very much in favour of a big government and socialism and everything else, but they weren't. They're almost the rebels now because they a right wing, and the consensus is very left wing in these universities and schools now. So maybe there's a lot of hope. I've got a lot of hope for our youth, and there has been a long march through the institutions. There's no doubt about it. You look at education, the universities, police, civil service, everywhere. Museums and even the army. I was talking to a major in the army, and all he could talk about was equality and diversity and inclusion within the army. For goodness' sake, so through all our institutions, but I think things can change, and we've had some tough times in the past in our history of our country. Leaders come along and can change things. I'm very optimistic for the future, really, Mark.
Edward, thank you. Can you just give out again where people can reach you? That'd be a good thing to do at this point again before we close.
Yeah, just Derbyshire Dales at Reform UK. Don't forget the UK.com, and send me an email. Love to hear from you. If you think I was terrible on this video, or if I was really good on this video, I'd love to hear from you. And yeah, let's have some banter and have a good conversation, and keep it civil as well. I'm sick of people on Facebook and Twitter just with abusive language. It just shows how ignorant some people are. If you don't agree with me or whatever, let's have a debate about things and discuss things. We can be civil about it. Yeah. That's again something that I you know, let's come to a consensus.
Because basically you're asking for the good people of Derbyshire Dales to vote for you, so you can all work together to keep it the amazing, beautiful place it is, and to get it to thrive, and then to be able to hand it on to the next generation of people. I hear
Absolutely,
you.
yeah.
Edward, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I'm going to play us out. As I say, stay there for the official goodbye on the other side. But I just thank you so much for your time. It's much appreciated.
Really good to meet up, Mark. And thank you for the interview. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.